Residence and citizenship in Eastern Europe is a great tool to add to your passport stack. You want to have multiple residence permits and passports around the world, but Eastern European countries often offer a lot of the cultural benefits of Western Europe without the high taxes, anti-freedom policies, government busybodies, etc. And now there's a new Eastern European country rolling out a new residence program. I'm going to tell you all the details. We've told you for years about the tiny Eastern European country of Armenia. About 5 years ago during the war, a number of our clients picked up residence permits on the cheap. Now the war is basically over and they can continue having access to live in Armenia, but not the obligation to do so. Armenia already offers a 1-year temporary and 5-year permanent residence option, but there's a new fast-track investor route that they're rolling out in 2026 that's going to give you a pathway to an immediate 5-year permanent residence. You don't need to live there, and that's the kind of backup residence that I suggest you add to your portfolio, ones that have no physical stay requirement. And so what you're trying to do here is accumulate residences and passports around the world so that no matter what happens, you can zig-zag in different directions. Armenia, for example, was more flexible than some other countries during the pandemic. It has a lot of tax incentives for companies in the IT space. Not for most of us, but if you're in that IT space, that could be beneficial. There's a pretty reliable banking system and a currency that has actually appreciated quite a bit against the US dollar over the years while paying interest rates close to 10%. It's got a government that is pretty well run, and yet it is something dramatically different from what you'll get in the Western world. Let me give you an example of how Armenia has played into plans in the past. We've had clients who have Armenian ancestry that allows them to apply for Armenian citizenship. Americans, British, nationalities like that. And what I've told them is Armenia's passport is not as strong. You cannot use it to travel to Europe. You can use it to travel to places like Russia and China, so that shows where they're going. Armenia's kind of in this position the same way Serbia has been for a number of years. They're increasingly becoming friends with the West, but they've historically been friends with Russia, where they're kind of pulling back from now. They are also looking to the East, and so they are increasingly moving to this kind of geopolitical middle ground where they're going to get along with everybody. Historically with Russia in the post-Soviet world, but they're expanding outward. And so what I told these clients over the years was, an Armenian passport is not as good for travel, but it's a dramatically different kind of country than, let's say, the US or the UK. It's a small country, they don't bother you. If you live in their country, you follow their laws. If you don't live in their country, you follow the laws of where you live. They don't add a lot of bureaucracy or a lot of heavy-handedness the way you'd have from a Western passport that follows you all around the world. And they certainly don't tax you unless you live in their country. And so having an Armenian passport gives you that geopolitical flexibility in a more multipolar world. What a residence permit can do for you is give you a place to live. That's just another option in case something happens, whether taxes go up or there's some geopolitical event or there's the next pandemic. Whenever black swan comes about, you want to have as many residences as possible. Armenia's new program, in my mind, could give you an option to make a pretty straightforward, reasonable investment. Get a 5-year residence permit you put in your back pocket, and as long as you're happy with that investment, you can generally be able to renew that every 5 years. This effectively gives you an indefinite ability to live in Armenia while you're diversifying a small amount of capital to a geopolitically different part of the world. And from my perspective, I've been to Yerevan a number of times since the war. I've never felt unsafe. In fact, it's one of the safest countries in the world to live in, same as neighboring Georgia. It is developing. Certainly the city center of Yerevan is the place that most people will want to be. They have ski resorts that aren't as nice as some other neighboring countries' ski resorts, but things are moving in the right direction. It's a country that is developing. That's why they're rolling out the red carpet and offering tax incentives, and that's why they're now rolling out this new 5-year residence program. So let's talk about how it's going to work. There's a new immigration overhaul. It's starting August of 2026. So we don't have all the details yet, but I'm going to tell you from our local sources on the ground kind of what we expect to happen. There's a new investor visa category that grants this 5-year permanent residence. The government has not established those numbers yet. However, if we look back to 2022, there was talk of citizenship by investment potentially in Armenia. They ultimately decided against that. The current prime minister has been somewhat against granting citizenship to foreigners. If you have that Armenian ancestry, if you're married to an Armenian, then that could potentially be easier. Naturalization, they've tightened it. They want you to be able to not only pass the test in the local language, but they have made it difficult to use things like translators in that process. And so for that same logic, I think the government was against citizenship by investment. But they had talked about numbers as small as $75,000 up to $100,000 in exchange for a passport. And so what I think they realize, if the people that we work with there are to be believed, is that, hey, a passport, of course, is permanent. Citizenship is permanent. You can keep that for the rest of your life. We can't take that away from you. And so therefore, a 5-year residence permit, even if that can be renewed indefinitely by keeping an investment, has less value than a citizenship. And so what we're expecting is a number less than that. So ideally in the 5 figures, hopefully in the upper mid 5 figures. Basically, you're going to make an investment. We believe that the new permanent residence route will be investment driven, especially during the initial implementation. We don't know what assets will qualify, but we believe that Armenia's developer lobby is going to be very strong in pushing this into having real estate included. Now, we saw that in Turkey, where Armenia, ironically enough, is cozying up to a little bit. We're seeing Armenia pull itself out entirely of the Russian sphere of influence. I was there when the Armenian president came to Georgia. It was a big thing. I was in Armenia when the Lithuanian president came and they kicked me out of my hotel room early. And I've been watching as they even try and become a little bit closer with Turkey. They're trying to be friends with a lot more of their neighbors, and they're trying to diversify their geopolitical sphere of influence. But anyway, Turkey rolled out its citizenship by investment program, and one of the big impetuses for that was developers saying, we got a lot of property we got to move, let's bring clients in. What will be interesting to see is if Armenia has a real estate option in this plan. That's one that a lot of clients like, because if you buy a property somewhere, when the poo-poo hits the fan, whether Armenia is your plan B, C, or D residence permit, you could just go to your property. You've already got a place to live. Ostensibly, you're going to visit your property, at least to go when you're going to rent it out or just to check it out, whatever. My view is you want to have Plan B, C, D, E residence permits and passports, but you also want to have properties in at least some of those places to where you actually have some way of going and living there, and you're not going to be living in a hotel. Because if you have to go and live in a hotel to escape something bad, or you've got to go live in some Airbnb, you're going to stick around in your country longer, and you are going to say, it's not that bad. But if you've got a house somewhere, if you've got an apartment, you're more likely to say, hey, I know what it looks like to live in that Plan B, C, D, E country. Let me just go there. So we think that you'll have real estate included. The question will be, Turkey's real estate lobby said, hey, put real estate in the citizenship buy investment program, and yet the government did not force you to buy from a developer. In much of the Caribbean citizenship buy investment real estate programs, it's mostly kind of like timeshares, overpriced stuff. Many of the companies that you will call if you're going to get Caribbean citizenship or Turkish citizenship buy investment are going to push you to buy developer real estate. Same with Egypt. I saw that myself. Why? Because they may not charge you as much up front, but they get a fat commission selling overpriced real estate that developers want to dump on unsuspecting people who only care about citizenship. At Nomad Capitalist, I said, we're not going to do that. We're going to serve our clients the way I would want to be served, which is buying property on the open market from a second-hand seller on the resale market, because that's where you can negotiate and actually get a deal potentially. I've bought property in Turkey. It's doubled in value. The agent keeps calling and saying, well, you sell it to me. I've got buyers. They want to pay you twice what you paid for it. And so if Armenia goes that route, I would call that a great residence program. If they go the route of saying, hey, the developers pushed us to add real estate, and most people will do that just to make things easy, but hey, if you can go and negotiate a deal on some flat from Tigran, then hey, we'll accept that too. And that's the kind of thing that Nomad Capitalist excels at, because we have great real estate people all around the world, many cases that have helped me buy property, because I hate paying full price for property. So what we have so far is a new permanent residence scheme with a 5-year residence permit. We think real estate will be included. We think that there'll be some options, at least, hopefully in the 5 figures. Maybe real estate, they'll add a little bit more. Other routes that may be available could be bonds. You can buy bonds. There is no tax on interest from bonds in Armenia, and you can still get 9.5% on many of those bonds, including government bonds. I did that a couple years ago as part of a residence application, and everything worked. One day I show up, oh, the bonds, they matured, here's your money. no problem. I don't believe that bank accounts will generally be included. However, having a residence permit will strengthen your ability to get a bank account, at least at more banks. I do think that most of the banks in Armenia are relatively strong. You've got some Western banks that are there, particularly French banks. There's kind of a historical connection and an interest between Armenia and France. In fact, instead of using the Armenian word for thank you, they will often say merci. And so you have that kind of French influence in Armenia where you can bank at some of their banks, as well as very stable local banks. One of the largest banks in the country, Ameria Bank, we used to have a beef with them. Then they got bought out by Bank of Georgia. And now we're great friends again. So I don't think that you're gonna be able to bank and open let's say a term deposit at high interest and as part of permanent residence. But I think that once you get the residence, you'll have an easier time with more banks accepting you. And so that's the kind of thing where you're starting to see a ripple effect, getting these Plan B, C, D, E residence permits. You get the residence permit, okay, that's my third place to move if everything goes to hell. And okay, I'm gonna buy a property at a lower price than what I would buy in most of the rest of the world. And so I'm gonna move some capital out of my country where they increasingly have sticky fingers. I'm gonna put it into a currency that has appreciated substantially against the US dollar in the last 5 years, even during a time of war. And I am going to hopefully grow that investment, and by having that investment and by having the residence permit, I can then go out and do other things like get a bank account and earn a higher rate of return and protect more of my capital without the obligation to do so, and again, without the obligation ever to live in Armenia. Countries like Armenia say, listen, we need some money up in this piece. You bring us investment, we'll give you something that you want. This is not like the United States where, okay, we'll give you a green card, and it's gonna take, you gotta wait 5 years in line to get it, and then you're gonna come. And if you're not here enough, we're gonna cancel it. You better be, why are you taking a vacation? Why are you going somewhere? No, there's none of that. No physical presence, invest some money, go somewhere else, come back if you want us. Now, that's the 5-year plan. We will update you as developments come. If you'd like to work with us as our client, you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. What do? We help people. I'm gonna come back in a minute to the other residence options you have now. These are even more affordable, but there's gonna be some changes. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, we will work with you to create your portfolio, Plan B, C, D, E, residence permits, and passports. If you want to commit to learning a little bit of Armenian, you may be able to get the passport. I do not think it is a slam dunk anymore. However, in theory, you can apply for citizenship in as little as 3 years. So these are the nuances that we try and make our clients aware of. Things change in real time, which is why if you're looking at a program like this, you can become a client now. We can make your plan now for what you need, and then we can keep you abreast of the developments that are changing in the world. So if you want to lower your taxes, if you want a backup plan for global mobility, if you want to protect your assets overseas, if you want to bank overseas, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. Let us build your bespoke plan for you from the folks who wrote the book on it. Now, other programs in Armenia now, they are going to keep a 1-year temporary residence. This is by nature more temporary. And so you can register as a private entrepreneur. That is an actual tax status in countries like Armenia and some other post-Soviet countries. Georgia has this also, which is what facilitates the 1% tax regime in Georgia. You can register as a private entrepreneur. And if you go through those steps, you can get a 1-year temporary residence. You can also get a business-based residency and invest 2 million dram, or about $5,000, in an Armenian LLC. Now, sometimes they'll want to see, okay, what's the LLC doing? Sometimes in a country like that, hey, can you hire somebody? Okay, hire one person. We've hired in Armenia. We don't have as big an operation in Armenia as before because we went and hired on a broad global level. I recently did sell an office that we owned in Armenia, so we just didn't have the people to fill it anymore, and made a decent profit on that. I'll come back to real estate in a second. But I do think it's an interesting place to hire. It's dramatically affordable. It's a culture that I think is ready to work. And so when you see these numbers, 2,500, 5,000, they are low. It's relatively straightforward. We've helped a number of clients do it. However, there may be little things that you want to do, such as, hey, I'm going to hire someone to make my case better. Because in countries like this, there are times when they say, hey, $5,000 isn't enough. Sorry. You need someone to help you navigate that. Now, those options are not going to help you get access to the 5-year PR anymore. Now, let's talk about the opportunity here. You don't have to get residence to do this, but if you're thinking of buying property somewhere and you're interested in Armenia, you might want to wait until the details of this program come out. Once the program does come out, there could be a real opportunity to make investments here. If it's only from developers, generally the city center kind of new property prices are going to be $4,000 to $5,000 a meter. If you look in Tbilisi, which historically the city center has been a little bit cheaper, you'll see new property from developers of good quality going for $3,000, even more dollars per meter. Looking at something recently for about $19.50 per meter in an excellent location in Tbilisi. And I had some friends of mine say, dude, if that isn't sold, there's something wrong with it. So the days of 2017, when I was showing people property for $800 a meter, smack dab in the middle of Tbilisi, or barely $1,000 a meter in Yerevan in the late 2010s, those are over. So what a lot of foreigners are gonna come and do is pay $4,000 to $5,000 a meter. That's still cheaper than Warsaw these days, or a similar kind of Central European market. It obviously is much more expensive than it used to be. You can still negotiate in old Soviet-era buildings in the city center. Yerevan is a city that I would want to say is close to the center. Republic Square, and North Avenue and all the nice stuff they have, that's where I want to be. I do not want to be going out very far. You can still negotiate on those Soviet era buildings. You know, you could probably get something as low as $2,000 a meter or even less. The $1,000 per meter standard of very cheap property just really doesn't exist in the Caucasus anymore, or in Turkey, or anywhere in that region. That's moved to Egypt, for example. And so the dirt cheap deals in Armenia are gone. However, if I can get a residence permit and I can pay somewhere below that $4,000 per meter mark, let's say I can get it under $2,500 or $3,000 a meter for decent property, maybe I've got to put a few finishing touches on it, that could be, if you do the right deal, a decent asset to hold for the long term in a country that's going the right direction, slowly, but the right direction on taxes, and that will give you a residence permit and allow you to live there. Rental yields are not spectacular, but they're not bad either. Compliance is pretty reasonable. And I think that there actually are competent professionals there. And so what we're going to be looking at is multiple tracks for residents for investment, for business, for skills if you want to go and do that. Most of our audience will not. Hopefully for property. And there has historically been for just making a contribution. So you have a lot of people that have been coming to Armenia. A lot of them have been Russian since that war, the Russia-Ukraine war, that has driven real estate prices up. It's still cheaper than the prices that have been driven up in Western Europe. Strong banking system, under the radar residences. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm not telling you to move to Armenia. We have had a few people that I've met who have moved there. I think one married a local Armenian girl and he's having the time of his life. But for the most part, this is a backup option you're gonna keep in your back pocket. It's a place maybe you wanna go once a year. It's a very nice place to go every once in a while. And no, hey, maybe I hire some employees there. Maybe I keep some money in the bank. I buy the real estate that funds my residence permit, and now I've got another place that I can go that's dramatically different from the rest of the world. Eastern Europe is its own animal, and with this could be a very affordable way to get a residence permit without breaking the bank and without having to really make much of a contribution, other than investing in assets you might want to hold anyway.